मित्रः शं वरुणः शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः यश्छन्दसो मृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽधिमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया आस्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव कीर्तिः पृष्ठं गिरेरिव ऊर्ध्वपवित्रो वाजिनीव स्वमृतमस्मि द्रविणगुंसवर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः इति त्रिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः आप्यायन्तु मम अङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रमथो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि सर्वं ब्रह्मोपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत् अनिराकरणमस्त्वनिराकरणं मे अस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्मास्ते मयि सन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः वाङ् मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविराविर्म एधि वेदस्य म आनी ईस्थः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासीः अनेनादितेन अहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः भद्रं नो अपि वातय मनः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तगुंह देवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vasishtam Shaktim Cha Tatputra Parasharam Cha Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padmapadam Cha Hastamalakam Cha Shishyam Tam Totakam Vartikakaramanyaan Asmad Gurun Santato Manatosmi Om Vishwam Darpana Dishyamana Nagari Tulyam Nijantargatam Pashyanat Manimaya Bahirivodbhutam Yatha Nidraya Yat Sakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanam Evadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Bijasyantarivankuro Jagadidam Prang Nirvikalpam Punaha Maya Kalpita Desha Kala Kalana Vaichitrya Chitrikritam Maya Viva Vijrambhayatyapi Mahayogi Vayasvechaya Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Yasyaiva Spuranam Sadatmakam Asatkalparthakam Bhasate Sakshat Tattvamasiti Vedavachasa Yo Bodhayatyashritan Yat Sakshat Karanad Bhavenna Punaravrittirbhavambho Nidhau Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Nana Chidrakhatodara Sthita Mahadeepa Prabhabhaswaram Jnanam Yasya Tu Chakshuradikarnadvara Bahispandate Janamiti Tameva Bhantamanubhatye Tat Samastam Jagat Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Deham Pranamapi Indriyanapi Chalam Buddhim Cha Shunyam Viduhu Stri Baland Jadopamastwamiti Branta Brisham Vadinaha Maya Shakti Vilasa Kalpita Mahavyamoha Samharine Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye. Let's chant all the four sutras. Athato Brahma Jigyasa Athato Brahma Jigyasa Janmadyasya Yataha Shastrayonitvat Tattu Samanvayat So these are the four important sutras in the entire spectrum of the Brahma Sutras, and it is indicated by the fact that each one of these sutras has its own adhikaranam, its own topic. And so we have promised that we will finish these we will have a sankalpa of finishing these four sutras, and then we will see what we want to do next. So we are doing the third sutra, which is called Janmadyasya. The second sutra we have finished. The third sutra is Shastrayonitvat. This is what we are currently doing. So here we have two ways of looking at it. So when we say there are two ways of looking at it, it should not mean that we're not sure which way to look at it. That's not the idea. I think the best example given here is what is called Dehali Deepa Nyaya. Dehali Deepa Nyaya is something which is a lamp that serves more than one purpose. Like, for instance, supposing you have a light inside your home. It's coming dusk and you now it's getting to be dark, so you better turn the light on inside. And it lights up inside the home. Okay? Or perhaps you have a light outside the home. You have a driveway coming up and some steps are involved, and so you need to make sure that there are lights outside. So there are lights either inside or they're outside. But it's possible, and we have seen this growing up in our houses in India, that there is in fact a lamp that can be placed right on the windowsill. And what that light does, in many of the smaller homes with a small veranda in India, then you will have some kind of a small lamp that would be put in right on the windowsill. And that lamp lights up both inside as well as outside. So here, the two interpretations, as we will see today through the Shankara Bhashya, is not meant to say, I'm not sure, if you don't like this one, then do the other one. No, it means that there are two ways of looking at it, both of which are important. So what the methodology we have been following in covering these sutras, based on the recommendation of Swami Paramarthananda ji, because as you know, I'm just revising that I was not sure whether, for those of you that don't know Sanskritam, how I can teach this, because the Shankara Bhashya is all in Sanskritam. And so a couple of our students had gone to Chennai, and I requested them to talk to Swamiji, and Swamiji said, yes, I have done this. And so please listen to some of the talks that I have given, and you can get an idea of how to do this. So encouraged by that, I decided I'm going to now do Brahma Sutra. And so what that does, in fact, there are two again, like a Dehli Deepa Nyaya, two advantages of taking this approach. One is that you first cover the conceptual idea of what the sutra is all about, and then you can follow it up with an actual Shankara Bhashya that brings out the essence of these concepts. So this is what we've been following. So today we are going to do that as well. So what we're going to do on the third sutra, we have already looked at the conceptual framework of the first way of looking at it. And so I will quickly revise it, and then I will go to the actual sutras, bhashya of the sutras. So for those of you that know Sanskritam, you also feel that there is something of value in doing this. So we will complete that. Then time remaining, and I think we should have enough time remaining, we will go over to the second interpretation of the third sutra, the second way of looking at it, and cover that conceptually. And then next week sometime we will do the Shankara Bhashya summarizing of that concept of number 2, and then the third sutra will be over. So that's what I intend to follow. Okay. So just a very quick revision. I won't spend much time on it. As we have seen in the last couple of classes, the main idea of the first interpretation, there are two interpretations. The first interpretation idea is that Ishvara, Brahman, is in fact the Karanam for Shastra also, Shastra Yonitvat. Because it is the Yoni, it is the Garbhasthanam for all Shastra. And the purpose of doing that is that Shastra the Vedas is considered to be all-knowing. There is nothing in the world that it does not cover, essentially. Really, in fact, not only essentially, just totalitily. And so it has not only the spiritual aspect of it, but all the other medical, in terms of music, grammar, everything is all concluded in the Vedas. And some of it has not been kept up very well. And so some of it appears to be lost, but it has actually lost, meaning that it's not lost completely. It's just that in the Kali Yuga that we have, the expression of the Vedas is not complete. But as far as the essence of the Vedas is concerned, it will never be lost. It is almost, it's perennial. And in fact, the perenniality of the Vedas creates a certain doubt, which was also covered in this first interpretation. And that doubt is, as you know, I'm just revising myself. I'm just revising this, this is not new. The doubt was that I can see Brahman as the Jagat Karanam. So this was the essence of the second sutra. Janmadi asya yataha means that everything in the world that is seen is really is the karya of Brahman. This much people agree. But when you say Shastra Yonitvat, then people say, no, you're going too much. You're going too far, because I can see the Jagat, the expression of the Jagat, as being the very product of Ishvara. I can see, because Ishvara is the Sarva Karanam. Like water is the Karanam for all the waves. Therefore, to say water is the Jagat Karanam, that we can accept. But please don't extend it to the Vedas, to the Shastra. Why not? Because even the Shruti itself says that the Shastra is Anadi. It has no beginning whatsoever. Vedas are always there, just like we see the electromagnetic signals in the ether are always there. Not absolutely, but relatively speaking. So that is the objection, that do not extend the Karanatvam of Brahman to Shastra. Just keep it to the Jagat. And we said, and the reason is that the Vedas is perennial, so it cannot be caused. Jagat can be caused, but the Vedas is perennial, so therefore it cannot be caused, so don't extend it. So to that we said, no, we have to extend it, because the Jagat may be expressed here and there, and the Vedas also is Anadi, that can also be expressed here and there. So it extends the omniscience of Ishvara extends to Shastra also. So this was all covered in this. So that is the essence of the first interpretation of this third sutra. Okay? So just a summary of that. Now that summary, now let us look at how it is contained in all this conceptualization. The various things that we are doing are not outside Shankara Bhashya. Shankara and his disciples, some of the clarification might be done by his disciples, but the essence of it is all covered by Shankara. So let us look at that now. So with that, let us spend the next few minutes in looking at the Shankara Bhashya. So for that, I ask you to turn to the third sutra, which is given in this text that uh, I had uploaded for you, and this is from the IIT Kanpur. Those people have done just an absolutely marvelous job. And so this is these are the text pages from it, and this is page number 9, which is the third sutra, which is Shastra Yonitvat. So please, if you want to follow this for the next 15-20 minutes, please look at that. Okay. Then also I had indicated that I think out of all the books, the one that has attempted to do a sentence by sentence translation of the Shankara Bhashya was with Swami Gambhiranandaji of the Ramakrishna Mission. And so that is the book that I have been referring to. And so for that, please turn to page number 18, where this third sutra is given. So let's now look at it. Let's do all the sentences. So, Shastra Yonitvadi Adhikaranam. So the Adhikaranam, the topic is Shastra Yonitvam. That the Brahman is in fact both the intelligent cause as well as the material cause of all the Vedas. Shastra here means all the Vedas, the entire Veda. So, first sentence, Mahataha Rigvedadehe Shastrasya Aneka Vidyasthana Upabrimhitasya Pradipavat Sarva Artha Avadhyotinaha Sarvagya Kalpasya Yonihi Karanam Brahma. So he says Brahma is in fact the Karana, is the cause of the great Shastra such as the Rig Veda. All the 4 Vedas are mentioned there, but Rig Veda, etc. So all the 4 Vedas, and not only the 4 Vedas, it is supported by a lot of Upavedas. Aneka Vidyasthana Upabrihmatasya means that it is extended to not just what you and I study in Upanishads, but also the various Angas of the Vedas. And Swami Gambhirananda have mentioned that. He says, so in fact, let's look at Gambhirananda's translation of this sentence. So he says, Brahman is the yoni, i.e. the material and intelligent cause, efficient cause of all the great scriptures, shastras like the Rig Veda, etc., which are supported and supplemented by other scriptures that are themselves the sources of the various kinds of knowledge. And what are those? He mentioned this is in footnote number 51. Works on mythology. So all the Puranas, this is the religious part of the of Vedanta, Vedas. So for instance, it also mentions all the Devatas and what kind of different Devatas there are. There are the Vishnu, Shiva, Brahmaji, Indra, Varuna, all those kinds of things. That is all part of the mythology supporting this. All supporting the basic spiritual knowledge. So it's not as though they are completely separate. It's all a big understanding of the totality of the whole creation. But anyway, works on mythology, logic. So here, for instance, the Brahma Sutra is the essence of the logic because it is a Nyaya Shastra. It proves, Brahma Sutra is really it is a very logic, just like, for instance, you have Supreme Court And so you have certain laws that affect people's lives. And so take abortion, for instance. And so that's something very real in the lives of men and women, especially the women who have to go through abortion and so on and so forth. So this is a real life experience of abortion, whether to have the baby or not to have the baby and so on. But then there is a certain logical aspect of that is debated in the Shastra, in the Supreme Court. Should it be allowed? Should it not be allowed? Is it called murder or not? Or does it belong to the very the women? It's their bodies. Let them decide what. So these kinds of logical discussions can take place in the Supreme Court, where emotion is taken out, and the two sides are weighed together. Similarly, is the Brahma Sutra. The Brahma Sutra is actually a logical, it decides what is what. This is the truth of it. It may affect your own life as it is, just like in the case of abortion. I mean, it's not a very good example because it's dealing with the terminating the life of a fetus. But anyway, the idea is that just like you have logic that applies to real life, similarly, Brahma Sutra is a logical text that applies to your real life. Real life means the ones that Vyavaharika Sat that we are dealing with. So anyway, various works on mythology, logic, discussions on religious and social duties, Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana, Nirukta, Chandas, Jyotihi, all of these this is what is called Aneka Vidyasthana Upabrimhitasya. Okay, then Pradeepavat Sarva Artha Avadyotinaha. So again, going back to the Gambhirananda's translation, and like a lamp which are almost omniscient. I would take some issue with almost omniscient. It means that, I think he has a reason for doing that. If you go to footnote number 52, he says, not fully omniscient, being within Maya. I think that is just quibbling. It's not necessary to say that. Sarvagya Kalpasya means that it is really defined as Sarvagya. So anyway, so you don't have to do that almost omniscient. It is omniscient. It is omniscient. So I will take issue with Swami Gambhirananda's interpretation on doing that. So anyway, Pradeepavat Sarva Arthavadhyotinaha Sarvake Kalpasya Yonihi Karanam Brahma. So this is the interpretation which is the number one by Adi Shankara. And then the next paragraph will start with Athava. And that is the second interpretation that we will take up next. But let's finish the first interpretation. So then the next sentence is Nahi idrishasya shastrasya Rigvedadi lakshanasya sarvagya guna anvitasya sarvagyat anyatah sambhava asti. So this is an interesting thing. He says, then going back to Swami Gambhiranandaji's translation, for scriptures like the Rig Veda, possessed of all good qualities as they are, cannot possibly emerge from any source other than the all-knowing one. The meaning of this is that if you have a product called Vedas, like Rig Veda, etc., supported by all the other Shastra, all the other Vidyas, Upavedas, as we discussed before. You have a product like the Vedas, which is all-knowing. it must come from a person who is all-knowing. You cannot have a product which is a design which is the result of a designer who knows what the design is. You cannot just have a design by itself. So that's the meaning of it. Again, nahi idrishasya shastrasya, of this type, like we see the proof of it. Idrishasya shastrasya Rigvedadi lakshanasya. That's like the one whose lakshana is like Rigveda, which is an enormous work of knowledge. Sarvagya gunadi anvitasya means that it has all of the gunas. Gunas in the meaning that it talks about truth, the difference between satyam and mithya, all those kinds of things. So the complete guna. Sarvagyat anyataha sambhava asti. It is not possible to come from someone who is not sarvagya. So the essential meaning is, please see, is that Brahman is not only Jagat Karanam, it is Sarvagya. And you can even add Sarvashaktiman, as I think it will come a bit later on. So Sarvagyatvam and Sarvashaktimatvam are both within Ishvara Brahman. Then the next sentence is Yat yat vistarartham shastram yasmat purusha visheshat sambhavati yatha vyakaranadi paninyadehe jnaya ekadesha arthamapi sa tataha api adhikarana vigya adhikatarata vigyanam iti prasiddham loke. So here I'll read the sentence again from Swami Gambhirananda and then put it in my language. So he says, for it is a well-recognized fact in the world that the person from whom the scriptures dealing with multifarious subjects emerge is more well informed than the scriptures themselves. Like, for instance, grammar, etc., emanating from Panini and others, represent merely a part of the subject known to them. Very good translation. So he says, okay, go back to the Sanskrit again and then I will repeat. Yat yat vistarartham shastram. Vistarartham means one which has been now available for understanding and their actual experience, complete experience of life. Shastram yasmat purusha visheshat sambhavati yatha vyakaranadi paninyadehe jnaya ekadesha arthamapi. So this is jnaya ekadarsham arthamapi means that. So now let's look at it. He says, look at Panini. The grammar, those who have studied grammar find the absolute beauty and completeness of Panini's grammar. The whole Sanskrit language is completely defined with no exceptions. All aspects of the various meanings of the words, how they are combined together. They say even now that really the Panini language is the Sanskrit language as defined by Panini can be put into a computer. It is so precise and complete of a definition of a language. It is amazing. And here it says consider the person Panini. Panini is also considered to be one of the avatars of Shiva or Vishnu. I can't remember which one. And so a normal person cannot do this. I mean, if you study his grammar and his explanations and so on, and we got a taste of it in our 2.5 years at Piercy. Amazing. I mean, the amount of intelligence required just to understand what the Panini grammar is. So he says, Ekadesha Artham. That is only one part of the person called Panini. All that is said is, if the product is great, then the source of the product is even greater. That's what it is saying. So he says that if this is true in our experience in Loka, what to talk about things that are so diverse and complete that we don't know the very source of where they come from. In other words, if Vyakaranam, which is a grammar, which is graspable by mere human beings, if you see the intelligence in that, what to talk about the intelligence of the entire creation? In other words, I think what is said is, Swami Dayananji had said this very well. I remember this. He says, supposing you are walking on the beach and you suddenly find, a cell phone. And you find that the cell phone is something that you can get messages, you can write messages, and it's just a great piece of creation. Now, that creation cannot come about by itself. And indeed, the number of engineers that are employed by Apple and others is amazing. And all of their combined efforts results in something. Steve Jobs had a very brilliant saying. I think he was a great person in that sense. He was not a very good person because he was not very ethical and so on, but that's a separate thing. But as far as intelligence goes, he had a very interesting saying. He says, it takes a lot of complexity to make something simple. Beautiful saying. In fact, that was the very contribution of Apple, that it made, even now it makes things relatively simple because it takes a lot of complexity. So Swami Dayananda used to say that suppose you find this iPhone on the beach and you appreciate it, you don't say that, it just came about by itself. You can recognize all the work that has to gone through this. Now, compared to that, if you look at the creation of the world, and it requires a mature person to see that it is a creation very well done. It requires, a child cannot understand it, but if you become an adult, and one doesn't have to become an adult because you take things for granted. The guna of a child is you take things for granted. It happens, my mother and father are supporting me, it's okay, which is fine. Similarly, there are people who don't grow up and they don't understand what's involved in running the world. That the seasons and the sun and the moon and all the intricate machinery within the body, it is a creation, amazing creation. That requires an intelligent person who has grown up in life to be able to appreciate it. But then you can say, if you do, that if something simple like an iPhone, and this is actually an Android phone, if you can see this, how much work is involved and how much intelligence, forget about work, how much intelligence is involved in making this you can see what is intelligence involved in making the world. That's a fact. So, this is the essence of the next sentence. So he says, Kimu Vaktavyam. So this is number 1, 2, 3, 4, line number 5 on page 9. Kimu Vaktavyam. This is a very interesting phrase in Sanskrit. Kimu Vaktavyam. Kimu Vaktam means what to talk of. That's exactly the point. If you can appreciate that a simple Android phone is a result of so much intelligence, what to speak of? This is nothing compared to. That's the essence of the word Kimu Vaktavyam. What is to be, what can be said? Let's see what Swami. Yeah, so it is in 4th line of the page 19. It says, it goes without saying. A better translation is, what to talk of. It's the same thing anyway. Kimu Vaktavyam Aneka Shakha Bheda Bhinnasya Deva Tiryang Manushya Varna Ashramadi Pravibhaga Hetoho Rigvedadi Akhyasya Sarvagyana Akarasya Aprayatnena Eva Leela Nyayena Purusha Nishwasavat Yasmat Mahatoh Bhutat Yonehe Sambhavaha Asya Mahatah Bhutasya Nishwasitam Etat Rigveda Ityadi Shrutehe Tasya Mahato Bhutasya Niritishayam Sarvagyatvam Sarvashaktimatvam Cha iti. Long sentence, but what it means is, let's break it down. Kimu Vaktavyam Aneka Shakha Bheka Bhinnasya. Let's read the entire sentence from Swami, from Gambhiranandji, and then we will put it into concepts. So he says, it goes without saying that great being here means Ishvara, Brahman, has absolute omniscience and omnipotence. So omniscience and omnipotence means Sarvagyatvam Sarvashaktimatvam. He has the knowledge and the ability to translate that knowledge into things. That is the omnipotence, Sarvashaktimatvam. So it goes without saying that great being has absolute omniscience and omnipotence, since from him emerged the Rig Vedadi, etc., divided into many branches, Aneka Shakha Bheda Bhinnasya, and constituting the source of classification into gods, animals, men, castes, stages of life, etc. So this is what is called Deva Tiryang Manushya Varna Ashramadi Vibhaga Hetoho. Yeah, so he says that it's mind-boggling how things are divided and all segmented very properly, all kinds of those things. And the source of all kinds of knowledge. And since the emergence of these Vedas from the being occurs, and so now one can see, my God, that means, just like we were talking about it, that if you see a cell phone on the beach, as you're walking down, you can imagine. Only a child would just say, oh, this is just something, metal object. But a person that knows what it would have taken to create this, not only the intelligence, but the work involved. really speaking, honestly, if you could look at all the electronics that goes into it, mechanical things, optics, cameras, how much work is involved. So if this is the case for just a small thing, which is just one piece of millions of objects like this, what about the whole world? That must have taken him, it must be a great amount of work with a lot of difficulty, isn't it? He says, no, it isn't. This is the greatness of Ishvara, greatness of Brahman. And what is the greatness of Brahman? He says, Asya mahataha bhutasya nishwasita etad yad rigveda yad. Let me do this again. Asya mahataha bhutasya nishwasitam etad yad rigvedaha ityadi shrutehe tasya mahatah bhutasya niratishayam sarvagyatvam sarvashaktimatvam. So here, the key word to talk about this segment of the understanding is nishvasitam. Nishvasitam. Nishvasitam means like the breath in a human being, any living being's breath. What does it mean? It says there are two analogies used to say that Ishvara does not do any difficult work. This is his second nature. It just happens by his very nature. And what do you mean by that? So there are two examples given to illustrate this very nature. One is called Nishvasitam. Nishvasitam means breathing. Just like for you and I, we don't, unless we have some disease like asthma, where breathing becomes a great effort. For most of us, for healthy people, breathing is not an effort. It happens automatically. And the other example given, which is not given in here but elsewhere, it is just like opening and closing your eyes. It doesn't require, and it's not like that, oh my God, you have to open your eyes with your hands and it's very difficult. No. It requires no effort at all. Just your sankalpa. Just saying, okay, just like we say, okay, let's do meditation. Let's close your eyes. You close your eyes very quickly. Okay, meditation is over. Open your eyes. You open your eyes very quickly. Very effortlessly. So then, this is the greatness, the mahataha bhutasya. This is the greatness of Brahman. First of all, Brahman is sarvagyaha shaktimat, sarvagyatvam sarva shaktimatvam, as we have talked about it. Okay? And the sarvagyatvam and sarva shaktimatvam is very effortless. Okay, so now I think we have covered the Shankara Bhashya, starting with Mahataha Rigvedadehe Shastrasya Aneka Vidyasthanopabrihmatasya Pratipavat Sarva Artha Vadyotinaha Sarvagya Kalpasya Yoninaha Karanam Brahma, and then ending with this paragraph which says Tasya Mahataha Bhutasya Niratishayam Sarvagyatvam Sarvashaktimatvam Chaiti. Done. So this is the culmination of the first interpretation. Then, following Adi Shankara's Athava, which is the second paragraph. Athava means or. you can look at it this way. So let's look at the athava. What does athava mean? So now let's look at the second interpretation. Okay? What time is it? 8:51. So we have about 25 minutes. Okay. All right. So in the second interpretation, so here, what we will do following Swami Paramarthananda is the second interpretation will be treated exactly like we did the first one, or exactly like we do any of the sutras. And those are a general introduction, a word analysis, and a conclusion. This is what we will do. Let's see how far we go. So the second interpretation is, if you recall, I'm just making sure that the connection to the previous sutra, this is what is called Sangati. So Sangati means that these sutras are not just randomly floated for you. They have a certain sequential way of looking at it. Each one of them is connected. And so this is called Sangatihi. So the second interpretation is also has a Sangati to the second sutra. This is the third sutra. That Sangati is the following, which we have already presented to you for your analysis before. That is this. You remember that when we said Janmadyasya Yataha, that was called a Lakshana Sutra. Lakshana Sutra means, because remember we had a saying which says, Lakshana and also the way it is proven, pramanam, lakshana pramanabhyam vastu siddhi. This is the aphorism that we had used before. What that means is, a thing is defined and the means of knowing how it is defined alone gives you the siddhi, the result that the vastu is. So this is true for our life. So you cannot look for something unless what is it that you are looking for, and how are you going to find it? It is called Lakshana Pramanabhyam Vastu Siddhihi Artha Siddhihi. So now, this is a very beautiful sequence. If you look at Sangati, the very first sutra is Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Just look at the relevance of this sequence in our life. Just ponder over it. Does anyone look for Brahman in life? No. We look for buying a car. Why? Because we have seen that cars are useful in transportation. We look for some vegetables and milk because they are useful for quenching my hunger and thirst. We look for medicines because if I have a medical problem, then it can help me. So those are things that I am familiar with and I'm looking for, and I find means of getting them. This is what's called Lakshana Pramanabhyam Vastu Siddhi. But is anyone looking for Brahman? No. We don't know what Brahman is. This is a new word that is talked about in the Shastra. Even amongst Hindus, for example, leave aside non-Hindus, the ones who should be familiar with it. If you go to talk to anyone, especially the ones who are born in this country, even in India, it doesn't matter where you're born. You talked about, do you know Brahman? You say, what Brahman are you talking about? That's what you should really seek. What? How can I seek something that I don't know? And what does it do for me? Why should I seek it? So that was the first sutra itself. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. He says, there comes a stage in your life where you want to know Brahman. And Brahman here means somewhat vague, but approximately correct. So Brahman here means something which is unchanging, reliable, gives me sukha, and gives me stability. Something like that in my life I'm looking for. I've tried everything else, nothing really works fully. It works partially, but not fully. Is there something like that? And you'll knock around and most people will say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Once in a while you come across somebody who says, yes. Really? Yes. It's possible. How? And you describe what is involved and so on and so forth. And if the person who is saying yes is trustworthy, is believable, has no agenda, then you have a desire to know this Brahman. This is okay, I want to really understand this. I need to acquire it. It is called Athado Brahma Jigyasa. But now the question is, where is it? What does it look like? What is the lakshana for it? This is where the fun begins. So now to complete this analysis, what we had said was that the second sutra Janmadyasya yataha is the lakshana. But only the lakshana, not pramana. The third one, Shastra Yonitvat, is the pramana. Second one is lakshana, third one is pramana. Pramana means pramakaranam iti pramanam. How will I know? I can see your description of what I am looking for. This one I understand. Satyam Jnanam Anantam. But how? How will I know? What are the means of knowing it? So there our postulation is that, listen, the second one is only Lakshana. The third one will give you Pramana. So here there was an objection raised, if you know. Like, no, I don't think that you need a second sutra, third sutra in this case, to give pramana. The second sutra, which is Janmadi Yasya Yataha, itself gives both Lakshana and pramana. How? He says you can figure it out. That I'm saying the same thing that you are. That if this phone can be done with some great intelligence, what to speak of this whole world? You just look at the whole world and say there must be a Brahman. There has to be an Ishvara. So this is called Anumana Gamyam. You can postulate it that it must be there. I don't need the Shastra to tell me. And there we saw that this is not tenable. You need the Shastra to tell you. Why? Because we went through all the very details of it, that Anumanam is too weak. It's too weak, you will drop it, and if you have to figure out yourself, then you have the responsibility for doing it. Yes, you are on the right track, but you need the confirmation of the Shastra, and therefore Pramanam is a separate one. And so this is where the discussion is taking place, and it's a subtle discussion. And so that is now where we are, that the second interpretation confirms the fact that the third sutra is necessary for pramana. This is the essence of the second interpretation. So let's look at that. So he says that just Anumanam is not going to do it. It's not powerful enough. It is not effective. Your tarka, shushka tarka, without the backing of the Shastra is not effective. And so we need to refute it. And so this second interpretation is to do that. So he says, Shastra yonitvat means Shastra vishayatvat. It is the matter of the Veda itself. It is the very subject of the Veda itself. And so you cannot know it until you study the Vedas. In fact, here's the Vakya. He says, Brahma na anumana vishaya. It is not the subject of speculation. Shastra vishayatvat dharmavat. Shastra vishayatva dharmavat. So this is a good way to look at it. So it says take the example of dharma. Dharma here means karma. Karma means punya papa. And so there is a lot behind all that. So as you know, the karma phala has two segments to it. So one is a drishta phala segment, and the other one is the adrishta phala segment. Right? So the drishta phala segment is what? So let's take a vyatireka example. Let's take a bad example like that of somebody killing someone. Someone in a rage. This is where krodha means rage, anger, is such a dangerous thing, really speaking. Because if you're able to just control your krodha, hey, wonderful things can happen. But if you cannot do it, something possesses you and it makes you do things where the consequences are terrible. Like this is what happens in road rage. Just some simple accident here and there, and something can just catapult yourself into killing someone. It's interesting. I was just talking about this because yesterday I was coming out of my wife and I were coming out of a lunch from a friend, and we were driving separately, and I was just backing out of my parking lot. I looked back, and it was all clear and so on. So I was about to just go forward. Suddenly there was a big bump in the back of my car. What the heck? How did that happen? So it turns out there was another person who was backing up, and he was backing up a little bit after me. So it was really pretty much his fault. But we both bumped into it. And so there was some damage in the back of my car, a little bit more damage in front of his car. So we both got up and got out and exchanged our driver licenses and all that kind of a thing. But it was really very, very revealing to be about myself. That in a few years back, before I really studied Vedanta and I do Mananam and Nididhyasanam, my reaction would have been a little different. I would have had a little bit more upset. I was amazed that I just took it as a normal thing. It was really his fault, but it is not provable. So we're probably going to have to compromise it through the insurance company. Whatever happens, it's just going to be some time wasted. That's it. No big deal. These things happen. But going back to Krodha, so if you have an anger and you kill someone, that has two phalas, Drishtaphala and Adrishtaphala. Drishtaphala is that you killed someone, and I may just take another example. The example is there is a hit and run where you actually hit someone and you ran away before anybody could get you. So the Drishtaphala, the obvious result of this is that someone got injured or even got killed. And so the Adrishtaphala is that you have to pay for it. And that is not paid for by the local police because they cannot find you, but you cannot escape the dharma of life. And so where is that says the dharma of life? We don't say it and we don't see it anywhere. Who's going to give dharma and what is punya and pa? That all is given in the Shastra. The Shastra says, please, be a grown-up person. In this whole creation, which we have talked about, Sarvagyatvam, Sarvashaktimatvam and so on, is there a chance that you will cheat Ishvara? Is there any chance that, can you even think about it? Don't. Who says? Vedas say, I say it. And I say it means who? Ishvara says it. Why is it Ishvara? Because it is not Purusha Janya, it is Ishvara Janya, Aparushaya. And so the laws of the universe are given by the Shastra alone. Similarly, that is the fact that the Sarvagyatvam and Sarva Shaktimatvam is also given by the Shastra. You cannot postulate it yourself. Like, for example, in the case of a road rage, you can say, I may have to pay for it. You go to someone and say, I think sooner or later you're going to have to pay for it. So there is a certain doubt, will I have to pay for it? But then you can eliminate the doubt. You know what? Wait, these are all, supposing you believed in Ishvara before this road rage, from now on it'll be advantageous for you not to believe in Ishvara. And says there is no Ishvara. I think I'm okay. Nobody found me. I'm good. So that means, what I'm saying is your anumanam. Anumanam means what? Your own tarka. That I think the adrishta phala is not there. It's okay. In fact, this is exactly what they say, that one tarka can be negated by another more powerful tarka. And this is what happens in the case of the science. And so some insight into the truth of what is happening about the Newtonian laws after a while are thrown away by other laws. And those are in fact also subject to be negated later on. Einsteinian laws can also be modified or thrown away to a certain extent, or to a large extent. We don't know. So all these tarkas are negatable, like dharma. So here also to say that Ishvara is the anumanam is not proper. You need an authority. So that's the example given. So if you look at the interpretation, if you look at the comparison of the two interpretations, you can summarize that. The first interpretation is Shastrasya Karta is Brahma. This is the first interpretation. Shastra Yonitvat. The second interpretation is Shastrasya Vishaya is Brahman. That is what Shastra gives you, is the Pramanam. That is the Vishaya, that is the subject matter. So here I'll end this class with this very nice offering by Swami Paramarthananda, which is the following. As you know, we have talked about this, that the Brahma Sutra is not the product of Vyasacharya. He is not the author. We often say, who's the author of Brahma Sutra? Vyasa is the author. We say it rather loosely. He is not the author. In other words, he didn't dream it up, like it is done with all of the other schools of thought. They're dreamt by human beings. It's not true for Brahma Sutra. So then what? Brahma Sutra is a composition of Vyasacharya based on Vedas, Vedanta. It's called Vedanta Sutras. They're not called just any other sutra. So therefore, at every point, we have to refer back to where does it say that. So this is what is called Vishaya Vakya. So Vishaya Vakya means that Shruti statement based on which this topic is discussed. This Adhikarana is discussed. So where is it? So in this case, it is Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 3.9.26. So chapter 3, section 3, chapter 9 and line number 26. So here there is a dialogue going on between Yajnavalkya and Shakalya. How much time we have? So this is an interesting story. I'll just summarize the whole story. So in this story, King Janaka, who's the father of Sita, had invited all of the scholars, and he says, whoever can win the argument, all the cows, 1,000 cows that have golden horns are there. So Yajnavalkya told his people, you can prepare to take the cows. So there was another person who says, Shakalya, who says, not so fast. And so he gave a number of questions to Yajnavalkya. And Yajnavalkya answered every one of them. And then Yajnavalkya says, okay, now that you have answered your question, let me ask you a question. And if you don't answer it correctly, something bad is going to happen to you. I won't go into all of that. And so he asked him, he says, Tvam tu aupanishadam purusham prichhami. He says, do you know what Nirguna Brahma Purusha is revealed only by the Vedas? Tvam tu aupanishadam purusham prichhami. And the Shakalya was not able to answer that. And so some problems happened with him. And so that is what is given in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which says that really the Vishaya of Vedas is nothing but Brahman. That is what is called the Tatparya Nishchaya. So with that I will end the class today. It is an ongoing explanation of this second interpretation, and we will continue with that. And hopefully I think I can estimate that in the next class we will finish the conceptual explanation of the second interpretation, and then we will go back and finish. There are actually 3 paragraphs. I don't know if I have enough time to finish all the 3 paragraphs of the Shankara Bhashya, but likely we will be able to finish it, and then by that, in that manner, the 3rd sutra should be complete, and we will go over to the 4th sutra after that, the last sutra in this sequence of the classes. Okay, so with that, let me finish the prayers and then see if you have any questions. Rahu grasta divankarendu sadrisho maya samachadana sanmatra karanopasamharnato yo bhut pushut sushuktaf puman pragaswapsamiti prabodha samaye yafpitya vigyayate tasmai shri guru murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Balyadishu api jagradadishu tatha sarva swavastha swapi vyavritta svanuvartamana mahamityantas purantam sada swatmanam prakati karoti bhajatam yo mudraya bhadraya tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Vishwam Pashyati Karyakaranataya Swaswami Sambanditaha Shishyacharya Tathaiva Pitra Putradhyatmana Bhedataha Swapne Jagrati Vaya Esha Purusho Maya Paribhramitaha Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Bhurambhamsya Nalo Nilo Ambaramaharnartho Himamshuh Puman Ityabhati Characharatmakamidam Yasyaiva Murtyashtakam Nanyat Kinchana Vidyate Vimrishatam Yasmat Parasmat Vibhoho Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Sarvatmatvamiti Sputikritamidam Yasmadamushmin Stave Tenasya Shravanat Dattamananat Dhyanat Sankirtanat Sarvatmatvamaha Vibhuti Sahitam Syadishwaratvam Swataha Siddhyet tat punarashtradha parinatam Chaishwaryam avyahatam Ashubhani nirachaste Tanoti shubhasantatim Smriti matrena yat pumsam Brahmatan Mangalam Param Atikalyana Rupatvat Nitya Kalyana Samshrayat Smartranam Varadatvat Cha Brahmatan Mangalam Viduhu Omkaraschatha Shabdascha Dvavetau Brahmanav Pura Kantham Bhitva Viniryatau Tasman Mangilikau Vubhau Om Atha Om Atha Om Atha Asato ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Let me turn off these. Anyway, I'll do that later. Good to see you all. Somehow let me see, you raise it up a little bit. If you have any comments towards the end, it cuts it off. I don't see. I see a comment from Shanti Kumar. He says thank you, and that was just the first line, but I don't see if he had any questions per se. I'll wait for a while to see if you had any questions. Turn off these audios in the meantime, including this new recorder that we just got. So I'm still learning, but I think hopefully this should be okay. All right, I don't see any other questions. So with that, I take your leave and hopefully we'll see you next week. Om.